Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons. Now, it's a concept many of you have probably heard of.
It's pretty well known.
Right. But its implications, especially for today, are often, well, deeper than we might think. It's not just about old pastures.
Not at all. It touches everything from the air, the oceans, even like shared online spaces.
Exactly. Public parks, fisheries, the list goes on. We all like using these shared things, right? But what happens when everyone just does what's best for them personally? When using something that belongs to everyone and no one?
That's the crux of it.
Hardin's 1968 essay really nailed this tension. He basically argued that, rational individual choices, when you apply them to shared stuff that isn't regulated, well, they can lead straight to disaster for everyone.
Collective ruin, as he put it.
So our mission today is to really unpack that. Why do some huge problems, environmental, social, have no technical solution, according to Hardin? We'll look at things like the public trust doctrine, some legal history there.
Yeah, how that offers a potential way out.
And what Hardin says we have to do to avoid this tragedy. Because, look, this stuff connects directly to our lives now. Think about wanting convenience, right? Our lifestyles. But also wanting to, not wreck the environment. That tension. That's the heart of the commons dilemma Hardin explores.
And it's fascinating because while Hardin really crystallized it, the basic idea isn't new. It's ancient, really. But humanity seems to have a hard time consistently acting on it.
Psychological denial, maybe?
Hardin mentions that, yeah. It challenges how we think about freedom, self-interest, showing that what seems smart individually can be, well, catastrophic collectively.
Okay, let's break it down then. What exactly is the tragedy of the commons? Where does Hardin start?
He starts with a really clear analogy. Think of a pasture, like a field that's open to all local herdsmen. Anyone can graze their cattle there.
The commons.
Exactly. Now, for a long time, maybe centuries, this worked fine. You had things like tribal wars, disease, poaching, stuff that naturally kept the number of people and animals low.
So the pasture wasn't really stressed.
Right. But then Hardin says, you reach a point of social stability. And that's when the logic, the kind of hidden mechanism of the commons, starts heading towards tragedy.
Okay, so how does that logic work?
Well, think about a single herdsman. They're rational, they want to make the most profit. So they ask themselves, what's the benefit, the utility, if I add one more cow to my herd?
Makes sense.
This calculation has two sides. The positive part, easy. They sell the extra cow or its milk or whatever. They get all the profit from that. So the positive utility is almost +1 for them.
Okay, pure gain for the individual.
But then there's the negative side. One more cow means a little bit more overgrazing. That damages the whole pasture, the commons. But the cost of that damage to the one herdsman deciding, it's only a tiny fraction of the total cost, a fraction of -1.
Ah, I see. So they get nearly all the upside, but only a tiny piece of the downside.
Precisely. It's a powerful incentive. The rational herdsman looks at this and concludes it's definitely worth adding another cow.
And the next one.
And the next one. And here's the key. Every other rational herdsman makes the exact same calculation.
Oh boy.
So Hardin's conclusion is pretty stark. He says, each man is locked into a system that compels him to increase his herd without limit in a world that is limited.
Wow.
Ruin is the destination toward which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest. Freedom in a commons brings ruin to all. And like we said, he notes this logic isn't new, but natural selection favors the forces of psychological denial.
We kind of prefer not to see it coming.
That's quite unsettling. So the pasture analogy paints the picture. But then Hardin says many dilemmas like this have no technical solution. What does he mean? We always look for the tech fix, don't we?
We do. And that's where Hardin really pushes back against sort of our modern instinct. He's basically saying, for some huge problems, you can't just invent your way out.
No app for that, huh?
Pretty much. He defines a technical solution very specifically. It's one that only requires changes in science or technology. It doesn't demand much or anything, really, in terms of changing human values or morality, like inventing a super efficient solar panel.
Exactly. Or a new crop that uses less water. That's technical. But Hardin argues problems like, say, population growth on a finite planet. They can't be solved just with tech. They need something more fundamental.
A change in morality, in how we think.
Yes. A fundamental extension in morality, he calls it. And that's much harder than waiting for the next invention. He's also directly challenging Adam Smith here, the invisible hand idea.
Right. That individual self-interest magically leads to public good.
Hardin says, well, maybe in a marketplace for private goods, but for shared resources, for the commons, that assumption is often flat out wrong. Unchecked self-interest there leads to ruin, not harmony.
Okay, so if tech isn't the silver bullet, what about appealing to people's conscience? Just asking everyone to, do the right thing, be less selfish?
That seems like the obvious next step, doesn't it? But Hardin is deeply skeptical about that too. Actually, he argues it's a terrible mistake.
A mistake? Why?
He calls it self-eliminating. Think about it. If you appeal to everyone's conscience to hold back from overusing the commons, what happens? Some people will listen, right? They'll restrain themselves.
The good people?
Maybe. But others won't. And in this system, who benefits? The ones who ignore the appeal to conscience, they get the short-term gains. Over time, Hardin suggests, this actually selects against conscience in the population.
Wow, okay. That's a harsh perspective.
It is, and he also talks about the pathogenic effects, the psychological harm. It creates a double bind. You're told, don't exploit the commons, be responsible, but you see others doing it and benefiting.
So you feel like a sucker if you comply.
Exactly. Hardin says you get two conflicting messages. We condemn you if you don't comply, but also we secretly think you're a fool if you do comply while we take advantage. It creates anxiety, guilt, what Nietzsche called a bad conscience.
So just trying to be a good person individually isn't the answer in this framework. It might even put you at a disadvantage. That really cuts against a lot of what we're taught.
It absolutely does.
So if conscience is a trap, according to Hardin, what's left? What's his alternative to just letting ruin happen?
This is where he introduces the idea of mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon by the majority of the people affected.
Mutual coercion. That sounds intense.
It does sound harsh, but think about what it means. It's not tyranny imposed from above. It's the community, the majority, agreeing together that certain rules, certain restrictions on freedom are necessary to protect the shared resource.
Like laws, regulation.
Exactly. He gives examples like parking meters. We agree to pay or get fined because we know if parking was a total free-for-all, it would be chaos. Or taxes, we might not like them. But we accept the coercion because voluntary contributions wouldn't work. The system has to make the responsible choice, the rational choice for everyone.
Okay, so it's about collectively agreeing to limit certain freedoms for the sake of preserving the commons. It's still democratic in his view because it's mutually agreed upon?
That's the idea. It's collective self-governance recognizing that absolute freedom in a commons is unsustainable. True liberty needs boundaries, especially for shared resources.
All right, so if we accept that framework, how does this play out with big real-world issues? You mentioned population earlier, and also pollution.
Yeah, he applies the logic directly. For population, he argues quite bluntly that in a finite world, growth eventually has to stop. It has to equal zero. And trying to maximize both population and individual well-being, the old greatest good for the greatest number idea, he says, is mathematically impossible. You can't maximize two things at once.
You have to choose or find a balance.
Right. And then he makes the really controversial statement that freedom to breed is intolerable, specifically within a welfare state.
Oh, okay. Break that down.
His logic is, if society steps in to care for children whose parents perhaps can't afford them, preventing them from starving, you remove the immediate negative consequence of having more children than you can support. The benefit, children, remains largely private, but the cost, supporting them in an increasingly crowded world, becomes shared, becomes public. It's another facet of the commons tragedy.
That is definitely challenging. It questions some really fundamental ideas about family and freedom.
It does, and it's obviously a point that's generated a lot of debate. But it follows from his core logic about the commons.
Okay, and what about pollution? You said it's like the commons in reverse.
Exactly. Instead of taking something out of the commons, like grass or fish, you're putting something in, like waste. Think sewage into rivers, smoke into the air, even like annoying billboards cluttering up our view.
So the air, the water, the visual landscape, those are the commons we're degrading.
Precisely. And the logic for the polluter is similar to the herdsman's. It's almost always cheaper for an individual factory, say, to dump untreated waste into the river, the commons, than it is to pay for expensive purification treatment.
Their individual cost of polluting is less than the cost of not polluting.
Right. The cost of purification falls entirely on them, while the cost of the pollution gets spread out among everyone downstream or breathing the air. So the rational cost-minimizing choice for the individual entity is often to pollute.
And this ties into basic science too, right? Conservation of matter.
Yeah, nothing just disappears. The exhaust from your car, the heat from a power plant, it doesn't vanish. It goes into the atmospheric commons or the water commons. It disperses, but it adds up.
Is there a clear example of this playing out globally?
Oh, absolutely. The Keeling curve is probably the most famous graphic representation of the tragedy of the commons in action.
The CO2 graph.
That's the one. Started by Charles Keeling back in the 1950s, it meticulously tracks atmospheric carbon dioxide. You see the seasonal wobble CO2 goes down slightly in the northern hemisphere summer as plants grow, then up in the winter as they decay.
But the overall trend
Is relentlessly upward, year after year after year. That steady climb is the result of billions of individual decisions driving cars, burning coal, deforestation, all releasing CO2 into our shared global atmosphere, treating it like an unlimited dumping ground. And now we face the collective consequence. Climate change.
that really brings it home. It's not abstract at all.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make this even more concrete. The story of Mono Lake in California seems like a perfect case study. It has the commons, the exploitation, and maybe a different outcome.
It's a fantastic and ultimately somewhat hopeful example. Mono Lake is this incredible place, geologically and ecologically unique. It's this ancient, salty, alkaline lake in eastern California. Crucially, it's endorheic, meaning water flows in, but not out, except through evaporation.
Like the Dead Sea or Great Salt Lake.
Similar idea, yeah. Formed hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's famous for those spooky-looking tufa towers.
Limestone formations.
Right. They form underwater when calcium-rich springs bubble up into the carbonate-rich lake water. But ecologically, the key is that its unique chemistry means no fish can live there, but it supports massive populations of brine shrimp and alkali flies. Billions of them.
Okay. Why are shrimp and flies so important?
Because they are the primary food source for huge numbers of migratory birds, especially species like eared grebes and Wilson's phalaropes. Mono Lake is a critical stopover point on their migration routes. It's a vital ecological hub.
Got it. So what was the tragedy part?
Enter Los Angeles. Early 20th century, William Mulholland and the LA Department of Water and Power needed water for the growing city. They built the massive Los Angeles Aqueduct.
Ah, I know that story. Chinatown, right?
Well, the aqueduct itself is real history. Starting around 1913, but significantly expanded in 1941, they began diverting the freshwater streams that fed Mono Lake, sending that water hundreds of miles south to LA.
So they took the water before it reached the lake.
Exactly. This allowed LA to boom, no doubt, a huge benefit for the city. But the lake, the commons, started to suffer dramatically. By the mid-1970s, the lake level had plummeted. Its surface area shrank by almost 70% from its 1941 size.
Wow. What did that do to the ecosystem?
It was devastating. The salinity doubled, which started killing off the brine shrimp and flies. The falling water level exposed the land bridge to Neged Island, allowing predators like coyotes to reach nesting bird colonies. The whole ecosystem was collapsing, a classic tragedy of the commons. LA reaping the benefits of the water, the Mono Basin ecosystem paying the price.
But you said it was maybe a hopeful story. How was the tragedy averted?
This is where people stepped in. In the 1970s, a graduate student, David Gaines, and others started studying the lake, realized what was happening, and formed the Mono Lake Committee. They began a huge public awareness campaign.
Grassroots activism.
Absolutely. And it led to a major legal battle. National Audubon Society versus Superior Court. The crucial outcome was the California Supreme Court invoking the public trust doctrine.
What one?
The public trust doctrine. It's this ancient legal concept, seriously, tracing back to Roman law under Emperor Justinian around 530 AD.
Whoa.
Yeah, Justinian declared that some resources like the air, running water, the sea, the seashore are inherently common to all mankind. They can't be exclusively owned. The state, the government, holds these resources in trust for the public.
So the court said California hadn't protected the public trust at Mono Lake.
Essentially, yes. They ruled the state had a duty to consider the environmental impact and protect public trust values when allocating water rights, even ones granted decades earlier. It couldn't just let LA diversions destroy the lake ecosystem.
So this legal doctrine provided the mechanism for
That mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon, basically. Following the court ruling and immense public pressure, the State Water Resources Control Board stepped in. They issued orders significantly reducing LA's water diversions from the Mono Basin.
They set limits.
They set a target lake level, 6,392 feet above sea level, needed to protect the ecosystem, and mandated that LA find other water sources or implement conservation to make up the difference. It There's a forced limitation on exploiting the commons, achieved through the legal and regulatory system.
And the lake has recovered.
It's been a long process, and it's still managed, but yes, the lake level has risen significantly, the salinity has decreased, the ecosystem is much healthier. It shows that the tragedy isn't inevitable if there's a collective agreement backed by enforcement to manage the commons.
So wrapping this up, the tragedy of the commons isn't just some historical footnote about pastures. It's a fundamental dynamic about shared resources.
Absolutely, from local parks to global climate.
And we've seen how individual choices, even rational ones, can stack up to collective disaster if there's no system for managing that shared resource. Whether it's Hardin's somewhat stark mutual coercion, or legal tools like the public trust doctrine.
Right. It forces us to think about the limits of individual freedom when it impacts the collective well-being, especially concerning resources we all depend on.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this.
Yeah, this really raises the key question for today. What common resources, maybe in your own community, maybe globally, are we still treating as if they're limitless? What future consequences might we be ignoring right now?